brings a few verses of David HaMelech, which accomplished so much in this physical world with periodically David HaMelech, which was despite his accomplishments, or together with his accomplishments, he had this constant thirst to Hashem. Thirst means you want to become close to what you're thirsty to. Someone's thirsty to water. His greatest pleasure is to take a drink of water. So too, David HaMelech says, I'm thirsty to you. I long for you, Hashem. My soul longs for you. And all these verses mentioned over here. And what we're holding, he says that Simoin, the thirst comes from the foundation of fire within the godly soul, because this is the element of fire. This is the nature of fire, that it ascends on high. Right? Everything gravitates downwards. Fire ascends on high. And that's the expression of the nefesh halikis. It yearns, it longs for something higher, which is ultimately God, godliness, etc. Based on the three different ideas, which was conveyed over here, the Memala Kol Almin, Soviv Kol Almin, Kula Kamek Al Chashiv, which was elaborated in the last two classes. And the way the natural science affirm, so too is in Eitz Chaim, that that the element of fire is in the heart, or belev is in the heart. And they continue there as well, why the source, Mokir Hamayim, V'haleichus Mahameach, and the source of the element of water and moisture is in the brain. As we see many times, you see it evidently as well, that people who are more hardy people, they're more fiery, they're more expressional in their emotion, their emotions are much more expressional. People are hardy people, as opposed to people with mind. They're more cool, they're more calm, which is similar to water, moisture, which is calm and cool, as opposed to fire, which is more of a fiery. You know, the expression of fire is the opposite. Everything the opposite. It spreads quickly, it jumps, and so on. Everything is the opposite of calm and tranquil. In contrast to water, which water is calm and tranquil. Again, that's the difference of someone is a more of a mind person as a heart person. Like it's explained in Eitz Chaim, which is we mentioned this sefer a few times, but just to repeat, this was the sefer written by the famous pupil of the Arizal, Chaim Vital. He wrote this Eitz Chaim Shar Nun, which is divided into portals. He writes, "Shubchinas Chochma Nikra Mayim Shebenefesh Halikis." This is the Chochma, the wisdom, which is called the water of the Nefesh Halikis. Notice the heart. The expression of the heart is the dimension of fire of the godly soul, while mind, intellectual pursuit, or godly intellectual pursuits associated with the water, with the nefesh halikis. Now, we don't have to repeat something we mentioned in the very first chapter when he spoke about the other soul, spoke of the animal soul. If we remember, he says, just like everything else, everything in the world is comprised from the four elements: the element of fire, water, air, and earth. And everything of the animal soul, as he pinpointed, he showed you the arrow of everything of the animal soul, and as our animalistic characters, where they are associated with which element, fire, like anger and laziness, from earth and so on, everything we learned in the first chapter. Similarly, Lahavdil, we're dealing with the godly soul. Lahavdil, the godly soul, we're dealing with the godly soul also. There is the four elements within the godly soul. Two of the four elements is water and fire. So when you deal with the hardy expression, the heart expression of the heart expression of the godly soul associated with the fire element of the godly soul, you're dealing with the mind of the godly soul that is associated with the element of water of the godly soul. Very clear. The only thing is over here, if you noticed, the Alter Rebbe in the beginning says that there's seven elements. The seven characters, seven attributes. It's not from the Alter Rebbe. We all have our seven attributes. While Alter Rebbe in this chapter began with the seven attributes. He says that there's three. It was classified, right? It was the three intellectual faculties, the Chochma Bina Das, and they produce the seven midas, the seven attributes, which is Chesed, Gvura, Tiferes, Netzach, Hod, Yisod, and so on. So here, and if you notice, when the Alter Rebbe it demonstrates or explains us what is produced, what is produced, and what comes as a result of one's profound pondering in via his mind, via his intellectual faculties, via his cognitive faculties, in godliness. What does it produce? So he says it produced love and fear, which is associated with kindness, severity, only the first two. What happened to the other five attributes? So Alter Rebbe says, I'm not going to go through all the other five, because ultimately they're all included in the first two, which is love and fear, which is associated with chesed and gvura, kindness and severity, which again naturally chesed, ava, love, is associated with chesed and gvura, and fear associated with gvura. So because they're all sourced, they all have their source in chesed and gvura, so I'm not going to elaborate on all the other of them, but I'm just showing you how via a comprehensive understanding and a concept, in this case the expression, the exercise of the godly soul and in its understanding and thorough understanding, godliness, it produces love and fear. So we see how attributes are a clear production of one's intellect. So what about the other five attributes? B'shar hamidus kulan. They're anfiyira ava. Not going to go into them right now. The Alter Rebbe says they are the branches of fear and love, until they say and their offsprings. And it's explained elsewhere. For that matter, in one of the sections of Tanya, the fourth section of Tanya, which is called the Geras HaKodesh, if I'm not mistaken, it's the 15th chapter. The Alter Rebbe analyzes each one of the other seven characters, other seven attributes, and one can look there if they have the time. You could look there, but here, what Rabbi is saying over here, it's not relevant directly to what we're learning now. The main thing is, in other words, you could find it elsewhere, and it ultimately could enrich the concepts we're learning over here, how the intellectual investing intellectually in godly pursuit and godly intellectual pursuit ultimately produces not only love and fear, but it produces tiferes, netzach, hod, yisod, malchus, which are the other five attributes. And it's worthwhile to look there. But in this case, Alter Rebbe says that all the other attributes are ultimately branches of the main two, which is chesed and gvura, which is yira, in this case yira v'ava, fear and love. So if we notice, then here we go to the next page, we see there is the following words of hadas. And many ask the question, when they learned the Tanya at the very beginning of chapter 3, we noticed Alter Rebbe, when he deals with the three faculties, cognitive faculties, the Alter Rebbe says chachma, bina, das, wisdom, understanding, and knowledge. There are other descriptions, in other words, the other words in the English language which define it, but generally it's as well defined as wisdom, understanding, and knowledge, which are the three, which give birth to the other seven midos, which is the seven attributes, which the total's 10, as Alter Rebbe began the third chapter, that the neshama itself is comprised of 10 levels, which is divided into, categorized as the intellectual, and then the seven attributes. But Alter Rebbe goes on, even before, in other words, he jumps to the attributes before explaining us what das is. He goes, Chachma Bina, explain us what Chachma Bina produce, and then eventually, and he skips the das, that third faculty of the third faculty of the intellectual three faculties. Alter Rebbe kind of skips it. So many times, given this learn to this third page chapter, myself and with others, right away they ask the question, what happened to the third faculty? So the answer is, and if the Alter Rebbe felt it was okay to skip it, why does he come back to it? The answer is that if once we know what das is all about, we understand it perfectly why the Alter Rebbe skips it and then eventually comes back to it. Because das is not something new. It's not something totally new in the information or the amount, the quantity of information which the person would gain through this third faculty. Not at all. When it comes to Chachma Bina, as you remember, Chachma was just that original flash, as we call it, Koachma, before it was expounded, that strong and powerful, potent flash, which is extremely crucial, and that's the way the person enters in his understanding any concept, in this case the godly concept. Bina takes that and expounds that with many details, as the expression here and other places, ba'orach, v'rocha, v'omek, in its length, in its width, in its depth, which here you're dealing with quality information, quantity information, which the Bina increases, or increases even more than the Chachma. And we have the advantage of Chachma over the Bina, again, as when we learned those about the Chachma Bina itself. The Das, the Das is not something totally new. It's not new information that the person gains through his Das. Das is the third faculty, intellectual faculty, but in the same token, and it plays and it doesn't play a role that it adds. It's something there to expound the concept even more. No, not at all. In the same token, it's an incredible contributing factor to the process, the intellectual process, and not only that, it's the key faculty which allows the intellectual information to produce the feelings, the emotions. And that's why the Das, on one hand, like the Alter Rebbe doesn't mention it there because it's not a matter of, it doesn't add anything. But later the Alter Rebbe tells us what it is, because the fact that the Alter Rebbe puts it in later is this in itself is what the Alter Rebbe is trying to convey. It's not more information which one needs, because you can have a comprehensive understanding of something thoroughly with a Chachma Bina. But the Das is an important, extremely important faculty over here, intellectual faculty, which without it, there is no Chachma Bina, there's no production from Chachma Bina. It's only with the Das, that's the way the person ultimately produces and gives birth to this feeling, in this case, love to Hashem, fear to Hashem. What is this Das? The Rebbe says that Das, when the Torah wants to express the relationship of the Machava, and other times in the Torah uses the expression Yoda, because Yoda implies of iskashus v'yischabras, which is attachment and union. And in this case, what's the connection of attachment and union when you're dealing with the intellectual faculty of Das? And so, before we even say the words, it just explains many times that you can understand something thoroughly, but as long as you don't internalize it, it doesn't become part and parcel with the person, it won't necessarily produce anything structured. Even when you think about a business, for example, someone hears about 10 different business ideas as an example. And each one has the potential to contribute to the person's business. And from all these 10, somewhat the person walks away from the meeting with 1 or 2, and maybe even 1, and he gets excited about that one over the other 9 or 8. And why so? The answer is, it's not because it's not because in his mind, or it was unanimous in the meeting that one is going to be the right method and the right way and the right idea to adapt over the other 9. No, not necessarily it's so. It could be it's so also. Sometimes there's a good idea and there's something. There's sometimes that the person gets excited about one idea because he internalized it in a way that the other ideas, he understood them thoroughly, but they still stay aloof. They stay, to a certain extent, abstract from the person. In other words, he doesn't become, you could even say, intimate with the idea. In order that something should produce a good feeling, or or to produce to the person to go on with something, it's not only that you have a comprehensive understanding of it, but you become connected, you become attached, you become united with the concept. That gives the ability to want to get, and that is kind of that conduit, that breach between mind and heart, which in other words, that the mind would ultimately produce these feelings, and in this case, the love and fear to Hashem. And that's why the Das is so crucial, because just understanding something thoroughly, not necessarily with a person, produce love and fear to Hashem. Not because we understand these concepts, like we learned Sovav Kalam, Memalu Kalam, Sovav Kalam, and that beautiful concept of Kula Kamei Kalachash. If we don't stop for a moment and we say, wow, this is real, that let's say we spoke about that in this very room, God's presence is exactly the same as 5,772 years ago. In other words, then it was only God, and now it's only God. You can understand it as an intellectually, and even have a thorough understanding of it. But if you don't put your mind to it for a moment, not necessarily. Even in other words, it's not necessarily that it'll produce that you have a strong fear and awe of the omnipresence of Hashem because He's right over here, just like He was here 5,702 years ago. But if you stop in a moment and you think of it profoundly, in other words, you attach yourself to the concept, and you anchor it in your mind, even it's something which is beyond time, something you think about, something. It could be even a few seconds. I used to say that when a person davens, says a successful davening, what's a successful davening? That he stands and davens for an hour and 10 minutes or 45 minutes, how long it takes him to daven, let's say an hour. It doesn't mean that every moment of that hour he's in that mode of that excitement with godliness. But it's not a deficiency in his, overall, it's not a deficiency in his davening. A successful prayer is that within that hour there are levels how much I'm excited with God and godliness, and if there's even a few seconds that they're the only thing the person enters this excitement about God and godliness, even for a few seconds, and it's genuine. You're not talking about somebody who just says, he shakes a little harder and that would be like the beginning and the end, or that would kind of encapsulate his prayer. No, he enters into this mode. In other words, he really uplifts himself. Like the Navi, the prophet. What was the prophet? He wasn't an angel. He wasn't somebody who became completely inhumane for the time. He said no. He was a human being, but he entered this different experience that he was completely transformed, despite that he was the individual which God used him in order to convey Hashem's word to the people, and at a certain time that he had to land, but the time that he was appreciating, or the time that he's experiencing this prophecy, he was completely transformed. As the Rambam says, based on the Gemara, which is based on the Pasuk, it became a totally different person. That is dealing with davening. When a person davens, even for a few moments, it's something that transcends time, that he could become completely transformed and become completely connected, attached, and one with his godly reality. That's a successful davening. And the point is that we try that majority of that hour, the person should have that experience. But it's something which is not calculated in time, because the person enters a place which is transcendent of time and place, which is ultimately the reality and the knowledge and appreciation of God. So this is what the Alter Rebbe says. Das is something it's not more information. It's about transformation. It's about information. It's about transformation, because here you're not only knowing. In other words, in the context of information, you're connecting. One becomes attached and unified with these concepts of godliness. That is the way and the only way that would ultimately produce this excitement. Again, excitement in the context of love to Hashem or fear of Hashem. And then ultimately all the other attributes as well, and he's in the expression of this godly excitement. But it says in a number of places that this is also the bridge between mind and heart, which by definition is so different. We just learned mind is associated with calm and tranquility, water, while heart is associated with fire. The bridge between the two is very much the das. In the expression of the Zohar, it's called Maftecha de Kol Shis, which is a key which is connected to six. In other words, it opens up the six. Why not seven? It's not for now, but it opens up. It's the doorway to the expression, to the expression of feelings of man. Shemikasha Daite, we go on in the text. Shemikasha Daite, he connects his mind. He connects his mind bekesher amitz v'chazak, with a strong and a mighty connection. V'yiska machshavti b'chayzik, that he anchors his thought with strength. B'gdulas ein sof baruch hu, in the greatness of the infinity of Hashem. and he does not divert his mind from this understanding, or this pondering on the reality of godliness. It's in other words, it's not that he knows it as a concept, but he doesn't keep his mind off of it. That itself is the reason why his machshava is yiska, which means it's anchored. And we find it many times in our life that by, like we say, the difference of a Jew and a non-Jew, true observance of Torah mitzvahs, that it's not like a, just again using this as an example. It's not an accurate example, or it's not that accurate parable to what we're learning, but just many times there's certain things, when a person thinks about something which is important to him, let's say Yiddishkeit, it's not a subject, it's a way of life, because our mind is always on it, we're always on duty, we're always on alert, not to chas v'shalom transgress and on aveira, and to make sure that we're doing all the mitzvahs. So this is something which you can say, it's not conceptual, it's a reality. Our mind is anchored, as a from a Yid, where our mind is anchored in Torah mitzvahs. Or as another example, a person has a family. When he thinks about his family, it's not only he has a comprehensive understanding of his spouse and his children and so on. It's something which is always on his mind, because it's not a concept which you understand it very well. No, it's something which is so well anchored and is part and parcel of your system. You don't stop thinking for one moment. A healthy person, right, doesn't stop thinking for one moment of his family, because it's not a concept. It just is. It's real. And similarly, in order to produce a true love and fear to Hashem, godliness must become real, as a yiska machshavta b'chesed. It has to be anchored thoroughly and with great strength. Because even somebody who is wise and understanding in the greatness of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which two words do you see over here? You notice over here two words over here which is associated with what we're saying. Someone who's a chacham v'navin. You notice over here, chacham comes from the expression of chachma, and navain comes from the expression of bina, meaning that he's a chacham v'navain. He is wise and understanding. Bigdol Saint Sof Baruch Hu, in the greatness of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So you have chachma and bina. It's not enough, because then it's still, you can understand it thoroughly, but it's still associated with chachma and bina, chacham v'navain. You're wise and understanding of the greatness of Hashem, but you don't have the das. If you won't connect your das, if you will not connect your das, and yiska machshavtei b'chayzik v'asmada, and anchor your thoughts with strength and diligence in the greatness of Hashem, lo yolid b'nafshi yira v'ava amitis. You will not produce in your soul true, genuine fear and love. Ki'im dimyonis shav. In other words, only something which is dimyonos. Dimyonos shav means in vain illusion, if you will. Dimyon is like an illusion. You could believe believe it yourself, or you could be in a state of delusion that you have Ava V'yira, that you love and fear Hashem because you read this sefer of Musar, or you read this sefer of Zohar, or you read this sefer, this other sefer, or you even read the Tanya. That, he says clear over here, that if there's no das, the way we just explained das, the idea of connecting, when becoming intimate with the thought, with the godly reality, it will not produce true love and fear. You could think you have love and fear. Someone could think about you that you have love and fear, but the Alter Rebbe says here it's guaranteed that as long as it didn't cross into the das, it's dimyonas shav, it's vain illusions. It's like somebody, not necessarily someone can give a good speech or a good class and thoroughly explain profound and lofty concepts of God, godliness, or like these different concepts, even these concepts we learn over here in this third chapter, with his Sovel Kolalmin, Mamala Kolalmin, and Kulakame Kulachashiv, which we learned and elaborated on so much and so long in the previous classes. Doesn't mean if he has a thorough understanding that it's going to ignite a fear and love to Hashem. It's not. The Rebbe says, Lo yoli b'nafshi. That's not going to produce fear and love, true fear and love. Kim dimyein is shav, just an illusionary type of love and fear. It's not true. It's not thorough. It's not genuine love. It's not genuine fear. Only via the das. Only when he anchors his mind, as he says, Yiska machshavta b'chozik, with strength and diligence. That's the only way that he will. It'll produce this true love and fear to Hashem. Valkein das. Therefore, the das is kiyum hamidos. It brings existence to the midot, which means to the attributes, the feelings, v'chayuson, and its vitality. It is the vitality of the midos, because without the das, the midos will extinguish. V'hu kol chesed gvura, the das includes chesed gvura, which is kindness. Like we said, that is the key, right? It comprises from chesed gvura. That is the key to which bridges the mind and heart, and therefore, because that's the key, therefore it includes chesed and gvura, pirush ava v'amfel, love and its branches, yira v'amfel, and so too fear and its branches. So that is the importance of das. So again, das it's not new information. It's about taking this information you have and making it real. And once it's real, it's inevitable that it'll produce this love and fear. And with this, we conclude the third chapter. We actually have just 2 minutes over here, and perhaps maybe we'll just mention over here the few lines of the fourth chapter, just to understand and reiterate, as we spoke about when we began the third chapter, and to understand where the fourth chapter is heading. Remember, let's not just take a look. We have a few minutes. Let's just start the fourth chapter. And again, we will try to explain in a few, briefly what is the difference, that clear difference between the third and fourth chapter. It says the godly soul, which we just dealt with in the beginning of in the second chapter. Excuse me. And in the third chapter, we elaborate what the godly soul is comprised from. Then this godly soul also has 3 garments, similar like we see by man. A person additional to him himself. There's the body of the person, and then he has his garments, the way he presents himself to the people around him, or even the way he feels with his own garments. It's something extremely, extremely part and parcel of our life, right? It's a costly. It's something which is costly, right? It's a world, like our garments which we wear. It's a whole world in our life. It's a complete world. It's costly. It takes a lot of time and concentration, because even though it's something external, it's not the person himself. It's only his garments, but yet we know that the garments bring out so much of who we are, how we dress. That's how much we are perceived publicly, and even with our person self. If he dresses appropriately, it brings out a certain dimension of the person. And the sometimes, according to what we dress, clean, neat, that brings out a lot of who we are. Similarly, and that's how it is in the physical world, right? There's the who we are, the person himself, and the person's garments, which again, even though it's external, but nonetheless, it's something which bring out a lot of the personality of the person. For that matter, the famous Rabbi Yochanan, which is brought in the Gemara so many times, he called his clothes mechabdusa, something which honored him, because clothes that truly bring out the inner esteem and honor of the person. Similarly, when you're dealing with the godly soul, there's the godly soul itself, which is these 10 levels of 10, the 3 intellectual faculties, and then the 7 attributes, which we dealt with in the third chapter. That is the godly soul itself. The way the godly soul is comprised of these 10 levels, and then the godly soul itself has 3 garments. What are the garments of the godly soul? It says, Machshava dibur u'maisa shel Taryag mitzvot Torah, the thought, speech, and action of the 613 mitzvahs of the Torah. And we will stop over here, but yet right away we see over here that when that only when the Alter Rebbe introduces the 3 garments, does he speak about the 613 mitzvahs of the Torah? In the 3rd chapter, when we dealt with the neshama itself, or the 10 levels over here within the neshama, the Alter Rebbe didn't mention a word of the 613 mitzvahs. None of them. To the exclusion of love and fear. We know love and fear are one of the 613 mitzvahs, but it's not something, but it's still an expression of the soul. It loves Hashem, it fears Hashem. It's not direct, or doesn't bring out our commitment or our association as Yidden which perform mitzvahs via thought, speech. In other words, mitzvahs of the Torah, which is associated with the thought, speech, and action. Putting on tefillin, putting up the mezuzah, lighting the Shabbos candles, sitting in a sukkah, shaking a little of an esrog. This is the significant majority of this Torah mitzvahs. Again, to the exclusion of love and fear, which is more a heart expression, more a soul expression. But the Tayag mitzvah Torah, 613 mitzvah Torah, is not associated with the soul expression. What it is associated with is the 3 garments. A person thinks. Machshava is crucial to our 613 mitzvahs. There's certain things which are associated with directly, mitzvahs are associated with thought. In the positive side, what a person has to think at certain times is have kavana. The way the Kohen brings the korban, for example, machshava, thought, is very crucial. And then the negative side, there's certain things which we're not allowed to think, we're not allowed to entertain our mind with, which again, machshava is plays an important role. Our thoughts play an important role in what? In fulfilling the 613 mitzvahs. Dibur, speech, learning Torah, davening, uttering the words of Torah, it is extremely crucial. Also on the negative side, not to speak lashon hara, not to speak rechilus, and so on. Speech is a crucial garment in our performance of what? Of our 613 mitzvahs. It's not an expression just of the soul, it's the garments of the soul. Maisa we don't have to explain and elaborate, because the significant majority of Torah mitzvahs deals with our action. Our putting on, the sitting in a sukkah, like we said, shaking a little of an esrog, it's all about action. Or majority of the Tayag mitzvahs of Torah that are about action. So here, when the Alter Rebbe deals with it, 613 mitzvahs, here he introduces the machshava dibur ma'aseh, the thought, speech, and action. In the 3rd chapter, as we mentioned a few times, you won't find a word of 613 mitzvahs, because the neshama itself, just like in the bigger picture, the neshama as it sits in Gan Eden, it can perform Torah mitzvahs. It's just a matter of expression of its love and fear to Hashem, to the malachim, to the angels, even though he does say that the neshama does learn the Torah, which it learned down here in this world, but it's all the neshama itself is about the neshama expression to God. It's a part of God which yearns and loves and fears Hashem and so on. So the Alter Rebbe dissects and separates it, says the 3rd chapter I will explain you what the neshama is. And the neshama before it puts on these garments of thought, speech, and action. It's not yet associated with the 613 mitzvahs prior to its putting on these garments, or prior to dealing with the garments of thought, speech, and action. It's a neshama. A neshama is a part of Hashem, so it loves and fears Hashem and thinks Hashem and intellectualizes about Hashem. Didn't enter the world of 613 mitzvahs. When the neshama v'oid, the 4th chapter begins, and in addition, every godly soul has 3 garments. These are already the garments which are associated with 613 mitzvahs. God willing, we'll in the as Hashem, the next class, we will also analyze why they called garments. Why is it called garments? Why machshava dibur ma'aseh? Why thought, speech, and action called garments? In other words, what is it within thought, speech, and action that they have this name and classification of a garment? So we'll stop over here. Have a great night.